going to kick things off here today. We're talking about lifestyle estates in North Palm Beach County and a little bit about kind of what's changed in the market. It used to be bigger is better, but now people are really looking for lifestyle elements, in their purchase, which doesn't necessarily mean the biggest house in the neighborhood, but could mean the right lot and what's the potential. And today we actually just wrapped up at an amazing estate in one of the most unique neighborhoods in Palm Beach Gardens, which is Rustic Lakes. The particular estate is a 10-acre estate with a main house and a very large stable barn that could be converted into a car collector's museum. Has a 2-bedroom, 2-bath guest house. Pretty awesome place. Danny, kind of what are you seeing out there today in the market?
Well, just to talk a little bit more about that Rustic Lakes, the really desirable element of that was that, it's not a full tear down and rebuild. It already had great guts in there, and then it has the 2-bedroom condo built in on top already. So opportunities like that where you don't have to go in and, build it from the ground up are very important. And then just the open land surrounding it, we posted a video of like all the opportunities, that our area has for car dealer or, people that have their own car garage, very into that, or they want their own golf practice facility. What's really cool about these is just, it's not just about the sheer size or square footage of these properties. It's the freedom to truly live your lifestyle and do what you want to do. And finding those, so close to the ocean still and close to our town centers of Jupiter and Palm Beach and West Palm Beach, it's hard to find those. So when you can jump on an opportunity like that, it's really rare and important to act on it when you can.
Yeah, it's interesting what I've been seeing as a Florida native. um, you know, Acreage was kind of taken for granted because we had so much land. And now if you look at really kind of priority of properties, is if you would say like, someone came to me today and said from an estate perspective, what is kind of number one, two, and three? Waterfront obviously is number one, and you could still get some large estates, from an acre plus, in some cases up to 20 acres on the water, obviously in the millions of dollars. But second to that would probably be in the right country club, on the right golf course, but potentially a parallel or more important, depending on what neighborhood you're in, is Acreage. And Acreage has definitely moved up the ladder now. And post-COVID days, people realized that having kind of self-contained properties, not only from the family opportunity to engage with family and friends and more privacy, but also having a lot of your activities, right there in your backyard. For instance, I live right off Loxahatchee River Road in, Jupiter proper, and I have almost 2 acres, and it's pretty special between the wildlife that I have that come across the property or just the tranquility and, activities that we enjoy as a family. So, large acre estates has really expanded and kind of repurposed, and you're seeing a lot of people either tear down, older homes or enhance, to the point you made about Rustic Lakes, existing properties that are great properties, but, kind of shaping or reshaping to what their vision or what's important to their families.
Definitely. So when you think about, areas where you can truly build out a lifestyle estate, Northern Palm Beach County, we obviously just touched on Rustic Lakes there pretty well, but you have a lot of experience out in Jupiter Farms. There's great acreage out there and a big equestrian scene, just like Wellington, where you can build these large ranch type estates. If you can just touch on those two communities and then maybe any others, maybe even further north, like up towards Stewart and Vero too, are potential great locations as well.
Sure. I mean, if you're going kind of from south of the county, you got parts of Lake Worth, and obviously in Wellington being kind of the equestrian capital of the world, and where there is, everything from acre estates up to, 100-acre estates, although very developed, that area. And, kind of what's the next area that everybody's going to from there, a quick up the road, just north of there is Loxahatchee, which was very much more, a little bit industrial, a little bit kind of unstructured, not quite like Wellington, but a lot of acreage. There's a lot of 40-acre, 45-acre, in some cases 100-acre parcels out there.
Yeah,
So
wow.
what you've seen, over the last, post-COVID really, you've seen people buying, as is properties, keeping them, of that acreage size, and then building these incredible estates. Not necessarily big houses, but just, multi-purpose sport courts, golf holes, potentially equestrian. Um, it's a whole different experience now, with these properties. And, if you go east, you start to run into some even developments. Steeplechase is a good example where you have an acre, I think up to 3 acres or 2.5 acres in there. And that was kind of an overlooked community for a long time. It's a gated community off North Lake. And when you see what's happening there, prices that were, in the, 800,000 to $1 million range for, decent houses, but dated houses, on phenomenal acreage in gated community, are now trading for, north of 5 million. And people are building these amazing homes and, building these amazing backyards with multi-lifestyle, assets and activities in the backyard. And, obviously, if you go all the way east, you get into some areas that are extremely expensive, but, have still some great acreage and estates left, whether it be on the intercoastal or in communities like Bear Club, where there is multi-acre sites in there, and a couple of people have put multiple lots together where you've got some 10-acre type compounds. And then if you, continue north, you've got some little hot spots like Penick Point near where I live. There's probably less than 100 homes, but lots that are, in the acre to 3 acre range. And obviously Jupiter Island to the way north, I think the biggest land holding still is about 40 acres, but a lot of that stuff has been divided up. There's still some 5-10 acre parcels. And then, as you mentioned, out west in Jupiter Farms area, you've got Jupiter Farms that still has some 20-acre parcels. I think there's one or two 40-acre parcels, but a lot of that stuff has been, subdivided down to 5-acre parcels, 2-acre parcels, and so on. And but what you're seeing happen out there is a lot of people that are taking these older homes and they're tearing them down and then, kind of building their ideal vision. And I think one big thing I would say is a native that I've seen changed, particular kind of why is all since there's this new demand. Obviously, we had the COVID event and what I mentioned before about people liking having self-contained and a lot of activities to do there and entertain. But because of the economy and how it's changed down here, and there, this booming new jobs, new companies that are migrated here, we're seeing a lot of, younger generations that are moving back that have, 2, 3 kids, and also, maybe the in-laws are going to get stay on the property and so on. So a lot of young families that are buying these older properties, knocking them down and building these beautiful homes, with guest houses, or in some cases, I've seen people buy 2 lots next to each other, building one home for one of the parents and then, one home for the kids. It's pretty wild to see this, the new kind of boom that's going on.
Yeah, and these lifestyle estates, it's directly in line with the biggest trend we're seeing in real estate of wellness and open air and shared community spaces, being a prioritization for not just neighborhoods, but in our downtown living condos as well. People want, even if you're living in a city, you want access to a large shared space and open rooms, open floor plans. And that's just becoming a priority now, and it's non-negotiable as well too. So if you were, say you're in the market and you're looking for a lifestyle type property like this, what does active life properties do different? So, this is our bread and butter here, where you live, how you live should shape where you live. So how do we help with this process? It's all about the outdoor living design. It's all about the consultation, the long-term ownership strategy. So just talk about how we differentiate if you're in the market for one of these type properties.
Sure. It's really, as our team is, really built to people that have passions around different lifestyle activities. And, if you're, majorly into something, or your family's majoring into something, it really helps it dictates really what decisions and what's important to you. And when you look at that from, integrating that into a process of evaluating property, or really, all the way through to what can be done with a property, it gets to be a bit more, I'll call it scientific. A lot of times people will say, oh, I want to be in a golf community, or oh, I want to be, I'm a boater and I want to be on the water and so on. But, you need to unpack, excuse me, you need to unpack that quite a bit. If it's a golfer, in particular, where do they want to be on a golf hole? What's important to them? Do they want to go, chip and putt, after the day is done? If it's a boater, what size boat they have, how important is fishing? And we have, multiple fisheries here. And, actually some of the best fishing is on the upper headwaters, the Loxahatchee River, because it's an estuary. So, if that's important to certain species of fishing is important to somebody, so, what makes our process different? We get very granular and kind of help the customer open up what's possible as it relates to qualifying, really about what is important to them from a lifestyle, not just from a vacation standpoint, but, on a daily basis, what does a Tuesday look like, and so on. And what we found with that is that it really is help, transform or help improve people's life through, I have multiple clients that were not very active and, all since moved to the beach, moved to the water. And now they're paddleboarding every day, they're playing pickleball every day and so on. And in some cases, it's just a gated community that offers amenities, that has gyms, that has pickleball courts, that has, community pools and so on. So, I think, from how we approach, really buying and selling properties to, on the sales side, um, one of the things we do is really do a lifestyle assessment. So each property, has certain lifestyle assets, and we really look at, based on how that, that property sits today, whether it be residential or commercial, what is great about this property, what's hard to replace, and then if we look at kind of the upside potential, a good example is backyards. That's really a lot of times the low hanging fruit. You've got older pools, you've got wasted space, you've got, space that's, can be repurposed. So little things like putting in putting greens, or, turf. A lot of people like turf these days, or a tiki hut, again, depending on what's important. But a lot of those things are not huge investments, like redoing a whole kitchen, but have tremendous return on value, lifestyle value, as it relates to, bringing a higher value to your property. And then, really helping people pass the actual purchase, or the sale. And let's talk about the purchase side. So, once someone gets in there, and sometimes this happens during the evaluation process, you're helping a customer through, why, they may be hooked on this feature or function about a particular house, but then they're missing really the opportunity of what a particular lot can provide them. And it's helping them, envision, what that is, understand what, the cost may be to put something like that in. And then, once they're in that house or a commercial property, helping them see it through. So bringing in the right partners that are, specialists in different lifestyle contractors and design teams to really bring that vision together. And I think the thing I see most, in the cases where it's done wrong, is someone says, I need, X, let's just say it's a sport court, and they don't think it through about the bigger picture. And so really looking at things more on a master plan, helping our customers kind of look at things from a total lifestyle perspective, and then really prioritizing how you may implement new upgrades, or, how you may tie unused backyard to make it a more, integrated interior, exterior kind of livable space, even changing sliders, for instance, and nano doors, and being able to open up and have that flow. There's a lot that can be done there. And then obviously the more acreage you have, then that becomes even more challenging as it relates to how you make decisions, how you tie things in together. But it also provides tremendous opportunity as it relates to maximizing lifestyle, on that particular real estate.
Definitely, and it's something we run into constantly with our clients, where people that have these type properties, they're going north and south over and over again. They have their boat down south and at their Florida home, and then they're like, oh, I need someone to properly maintain this, I need someone to keep an eye on my property for me. This is that, just on steroids. It's like, yes, you have this huge lifestyle portfolio in your yard and you expanded all this, but now, you got to maintain your practice facility if you have one. The pool needs maintenance. Your tennis courts need to be properly, watched after, and it has that full property management angle that comes in as well. It's not just, okay, I got it now, and then I'm all set. So,
Well, I think
if
the
you,
other, you bring up a good point because, one of the biggest, and I put myself in that customer range. I can't tell you how many times at a different home that I've had, a summer home or what, a lake home or whatever it's been. And, you show up and things aren't working. And it's like, these are lifestyle, homes that you want to go there, entertain your family and friends and have a good time. And you want things to work, and in particular, when you look at people that are using places seasonally, there's a huge part of lifestyle properties that that we do as it relates to making that process as seamless as and so that they can enjoy the time when they're here and not be having to deal with simple things that could have been addressed ahead of time, and then long term protects the value of that asset because of the fact you're maintaining these different lifestyle amenities on your property properly.
And it was a great point you made too of bringing up that it's not just for a legacy type estate. The entry level, depending on the community, can be lower than you think. So it's a whole other bracket, if you're a buyer that you might not be aware of, if you have an interest in cars and outdoor recreation. We haven't even touched on, like hunting or anything like that, but you have a huge background in that comes into play here too. So, these lifestyle estates, it's not someone else's vision, it's something that you always envisioned, and you might not even know that you have the accessibility to find this type of property down here. So, whether you liked hearing about the Rustic Lakes estate and the potential there, or any other lifestyle property, throughout northern Palm Beach County, we'd love to help, and reach out to us anytime. You got anything else,
Yeah, and
Matt?
I would just close with the other thing we see in clients we have, somebody that lives on the water and then has their ranch out west. And so, a lot of times, they're not necessarily from a farming, ranching background. And so they need a lot of help, with that land asset. So, that when you think about things as a portfolio, it takes on a new life as it relates to your enjoyment and making sure things run smoothly. And also that, strategically, you're making the right decisions. You're making good investments, in both properties, and how that may be set up as it relates to, your future generations and the legacy that you leave, with your real estate.
Definitely. Couldn't have said it better myself. So yes, so that's our lifestyle estate episode. Again, if you have any interest in this type of property, reach out to us. You can go on activelifeproperties.com, see all of our featured properties, our current opportunities there. And I appreciate you for watching.
Take care.